Welcome to the Rancher's Voice, presented by the Montana Stockgrowers Association. I'm Jay Bodner, MSGA's Executive Vice President.
And I'm Raylee Honeycutt, Director of Natural Resources. Join us for conversations surrounding policy, the legislature, and issues that matter most to ranching families in Montana.
Welcome to this week's episode. This week we're going to be giving some updates on some national and federal level issues. We're also going to be looking at our current bill lineup for the week. And then we also have a great interview with Lieutenant Governor Kristen Juras.
And just a few reminders for our listeners to make sure to subscribe to the Rancher's Voice. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Make sure to like, share, and comment each episode. And if you have questions for us, you can email those to kenny@mtbeef.org. All right, we're going to start off this week with some federal updates. A lot has happened on the federal level and wanted to dive in and give a couple updates from there. So we have the inauguration happened last Wednesday, and following that, President Biden immediately followed with some executive orders. And those orders issued a 60-day freeze on certain regulations from the Trump administration. They affected the following. They will hold all rules that have not gone to the Federal Register until an appointed individual from the respective agency has the opportunity to review those rules. Second, those rules that have been sent to the Federal Register but not yet published will be pulled back and will then be reviewed again by the appointed individual for each agency. And last, those rules that have been published in the register but haven't taken effect, they are suggested to be paused for 30 days and include an open 30-day comment period. And after those 30 days can either move forward and be allowed to proceed or will go under further review or referred back to the Office of Management and Budget. So currently we are in the process of pulling a list of all of those rules and directives together, and we'll be reviewing those and sharing with our members later at a later date what all of these freezes mean for our membership.
Yeah, that's great. Certainly some important things there that we're going to be looking at with Waters of the U.S. and a few of those other rules that we were supportive of those getting passed. So we'll certainly work with our national partners as we see exactly what's going to get pulled back on those rules. Just on another note, we have seen a few appointments that are happening at the national level. So we also have with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Martha Williams. Martha Williams was the director for the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks the last few years under the Bullock administration. And so she was just now announced, she was first announced as the principal deputy director for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but then recently was also announced as the acting director for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So right now, she'll be leading that agency, and we have a very strong working relationship with Miss Williams as she worked with the state. So we look forward to that appointment and working with her on a number of issues that affect us here in Montana.
Yeah, it's always great to have someone at that level that has a good understanding of Montana issues.
Yeah, and at the state level, we do also have kind of the anticipated, another anticipated appointment with Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And Governor Gianforte has just recently announced Hank Warsack to lead the agency for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And Mr. Warsack has been within Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for the past 17 years. He's played a lot of different roles within FWP. I think most recently, mainly in the licensing division. So we worked with Mr. Warsack for a number of years, and we look forward to his leadership and as we kind of move on with the state perspective.
Moving on to a recap of our past week, we testified on a variety of different bills and wanted to kind of share updates with you all on those.
Yeah, so kick things off, we have Senate Bill 55. This was to revise the water right ownership updates. We provided a little bit of information on that in previous podcasts, but just to give everybody an update, we wanted to let people know that it had passed the Senate and it has been transmitted to the House. Really very little opposition on this. There was a lot of work on the Water Policy Interim Committee. So this bill is moving along quite quickly at this point.
The second bill was in the House Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and that was House Bill 147, which established a Montana Hunters and Anglers Community Fund. We testified on that as well, and it had great support from a variety of different groups. We did get an update that Representative France is working on a few amendments to address some of the concerns that folks talked about in their testimony, and that will be moving into executive action in the very near future.
And next, we have Senate Bill 65. This dealt with business liability as part of Governor Gianforte's COVID response. This does provide for liability protections for small businesses, and which agriculture is a part of that. And we did send in support of that. This bill, once again, has also been moving very quickly. It passed the Senate with pretty strong support, and it has moved into, had the first first hearing in the House in Business and Labor. And once again, there was also a lot of strong support from the business community. So we expect this bill, once again, to move pretty quickly onto potentially the governor's desk.
In addition to that, we tracked a variety of different bills last week and moving into this week. But let's talk a little bit more about this week for the week of January 25th. I know you testified this morning on a bill, and then we have a couple more slated for later this week.
Yeah, we got the opportunity today, part of House Bill 2 dealing with the ag experiment stations and extensions budget within MSU. So it's always a great opportunity to go up there and talk about all of the great things that MSU is doing with ag experiment stations, and certainly the research that's critical to the livestock industry, the grain industry, really all of agriculture in Montana. We were joined by Dean Bourgeois and Cody Stone with Extension, and so it was great to have them kind of lead the charge in talking about all the specifics that MSU is doing on the research front and then extension front. One of the things that was pretty interesting that a number of the committee members picked up on is that Dr. Bourgeois talked about for every dollar invested, it brings back $45 to the state. And certainly with numbers like that, that's pretty critical to Montana. And so it was exciting to kind of hear those kind of numbers and the support that, they discussed. In addition to that, all part of that MSU extension and research, they also have fire preparedness and fire training. That's all a very critical part of Montana also. And then for the Bureau of Mines, their groundwater investigation program also. So we got to stand in support of that. And certainly we think that they have a good opportunity to get their budget passed.
In addition, we have lined up Senate Bill 27 this week. That is a bill that we've talked about in the past and allows for a multiplier for the reimbursement of the livestock loss. That has moved to the House Ag Committee, and so we will be testifying on that this week. It did pass the Senate 49-1, and so look forward to continuing that momentum as it moves through the House side.
Yeah, and also with the livestock loss program, we have Senate Bill 58. So that added another $100,000 into the restricted account to reduce predation. So those non-lethal and preventative measures. That did also pass second reading and a very strong support, and then it got re-referred to Senate Finance and Claims. And that's a pretty normal procedure anytime that money's involved. Most of those bills will go through Senate Finance and Claims. So that will be up this week, and we'll be testifying in support of that again.
Great. And then we just have a few bills on our watch list as well that we'll be tracking, not necessarily testifying, but just keeping an eye on for this week.
Yeah, and House tax, we have House Bill 148. This looks at changing the reappraisal cycle for Class 3 and 4, which includes agriculture. So a couple of sessions back, we went from a 6-year reappraisal cycle to 2 years. Now, this would switch that from 2 years back to 6 years. So I think at this point, the state's pretty comfortable in just the cycle we have now. It kind of takes out the highs and lows with a quicker reappraisal cycle. So that's something we'll be watching pretty close.
Another item that we'll be watching, and it's not necessarily a bill, but a resolution, will be the confirmation of Governor Gianforte's Director of Department of Environmental Quality, Chris Dorrington. His confirmation is scheduled for Monday afternoon, and expect him to be confirmed and move forward. So that confirmation hearing is moving forward. Also, Senate Bill 106, which establishes license and qualifications for vet techs, that is being heard this week, along with House Bill 173, which is a revised law regarding sale of timber on state lands. That wraps it up for our weekly issues, but let's go ahead and introduce our guest interview.
Yeah, we had the distinct pleasure of having Lieutenant Governor Kristen Juras join us this week. Lieutenant Governor Juris, she's a fourth-generation Montanan. She grew up on a family ranch in Conrad. She was in private practice in Great Falls for a number of years. She also did teach at the law school in Missoula. She graduated from the University of Montana and then went on to law school at Georgia Law School. And she taught almost for 20 years at the University of Montana for the law school. So with that, welcome, Kristen Juras. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We have the distinct pleasure of having the Lieutenant Governor, Kristen Juras, join us for this week's episode. Lieutenant Governor is a fourth-generation Montanan who grew up on a family ranch in Conrad. So welcome, Lieutenant Governor.
It's a pleasure to be here. Always like talking to the livestock and agricultural folks.
Thanks. I thought it might be great just to kind of start off with just you sharing a little bit about your background with our listeners.
Yes, as you said, I grew up on a ranch near Conrad, Montana. My dad, Rib Gustafson, and my mom, Pat. My first memory is actually falling off of a horse when I was 3 years old. My dad made me get back up. That was a good lesson to learn early in life. My dad didn't inherit a ranch. He pieced it together. And my brother, Bar Gustafson, and his lovely bride, Colleen, run the major part of the ranch up in Glacier County. Today, I have a brother, Wiley Gustafson, who's a well-known singer, cowboy artist. He also ranches closer to Conrad, and brothers Eric and Sid. And one of the things I'm proud of is that 5 members of my family have been inducted into the Montana Cowboy Hall of Fame. So I haven't made it yet. I'm the one who isn't actively operating. But, you know, the truth of the matter is today, farms and ranches, it's hard to support large families. My mom and dad had 5 kids. We couldn't all stay on the ranches. So I went into law with the intent of helping and representing farmers and ranchers, and have been doing that for 38 years, and do a lot of work with just water rights, everything about agricultural operations, leases, sales, corporate issues. And one of the things I've really been interested in the past several years is helping farmers and ranchers plan for transitioning. It is so important that we keep these farms and ranches, which make Montana what Montana is, in the family. And you really have to do some planning to do that. So I'm always encouraging and talking to producers to make sure they get that done. A lot of them don't like to do it. They think everything's going to turn out fine. The kids will all work it out once I'm gone. And I like to tell them, well, no, really should be the one to kind of lead the horse to the corral on this, and let's get it done.
That's great.
Excellent. Well, we are so excited to have you on our podcast, and wanted to kick off with our first question about the Montana Comeback Plan. So the GM Forte team, while you were all campaigning, that was kind of your key phrase and a plan that you worked off of. And we're starting to see some of those elements starting to roll out with executive orders and task force being created. So what can you tell us about what we might be seeing in the next couple weeks or months related to that Montana Comeback Plan?
Well, we are serious about the Montana Comeback Plan, and that's what we devise our policy and our discussion with legislators. We have a plan that we want to work with legislators to pass. Some of it is regulatory and executive action. So let me start a little bit just with working with legislators. Governor Gianforte wants to create more good paying jobs and protect our Montana way of life. We want to improve the business climate for farmers, ranchers, Main Street business owners. We want to attract more businesses and entrepreneurs to the state of Montana. So we've already introduced legislation that'll reduce the top marginal income tax rate for individuals from 6.9% to 6.75%, and hope as revenues continue to grow in Montana to continue to reduce that in future years. We proposed a business equipment tax rate reduction, up the exemption up to $200,000 from $100,000, which should help farmers, ranchers, and other business owners. And we have proposed some broadband property tax incentives too. It's very important to us to keep vitality in our rural communities and bringing broadband into every community so that Montanans can come home and work there from home, bring their W-2s with them, their kids to support our schools, spouses that'll join the workforce. Another thing along those lines of protecting our rural communities is improving telemedicine in rural communities and delivery of healthcare services in rural communities. Education is a part of the plan. Education, I'm a product of Montana education. I'm proud of it. And we need to keep our schools doing well. We've introduced legislation to provide incentives for school districts to increase starting teacher pay, which right now is the lowest in the nation. As with regard to higher education, even in high school, we're very interested in trades training, apprenticeships, and legislation has been introduced that will allow a tax credit for employers to help finance the costs of trades education, so such as the butcher school in Miles City. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do on an executive level. We're planning to send out our first Come Back to Montana mailer. We're going to send these to all of the alumni from our public and private universities in Montana who do no longer live in Montana, and ask them to come back home, settle in Montana communities, raise their kids. And we think that's going to be part of the package that helps the Montana economy get going again.
Excellent. And I'll just say that I'm a comeback kid. So Montanans want to come back. So I'm glad that you are going to be recruiting them.
Yep.
And it's also great just to hear about some of the work that's going to be impacting rural Montana, because we are a rural state and a lot of business gets conducted in rural Montana, and we want to make those vibrant communities. And so it's pretty exciting to hear some of those broadband and certainly the business equipment tax. That's something we've been looking at for a lot of years. And so it's nice to see that exemption getting raised and taking out, I think, an additional potentially 4,000 of our members that would be eliminated out of that, paying that business equipment tax. So we're pretty excited to talk about that. I know a big part of the administration has been just opening up business in Montana, and there's been a number of things that the governor has rolled out in the last recent weeks, and some of those have even kind of been certainly related to COVID, and we've had Senate Bill 65, which looks at trying to provide some kind of liability protection. I know it's moved pretty smoothly through the Senate side, and it had a House hearing today. And if you could just maybe talk a little bit about the protection of business owners and what we might see for the governor as it relates to COVID.
Yes, Senator Fitzpatrick worked with us in drafting that bill, and we want very much to move through COVID, get business back to normal. I don't need to tell you how hard this has hit, especially small Montana restaurants, hospitality industry, but all across the business spectrum. We need to get back to business just as soon as possible. And I also just want to mention Governor Gianforte gets frequent reports on vaccinations, has become very active in making sure we're getting our vaccinations rolled out, including to rural communities. So that's part of getting us back to normal, as well as providing protection so that businesses aren't sued and faced with lawsuits related to COVID illnesses or COVID events. So that's what SB 65 does. It it's a higher standard for a claim to be brought, gross negligence or wanton misconduct. And we all know businesses are doing their very best to protect themselves, to protect their customers, to protect their employees. They are doing what's right throughout Montana. And as long as they take reasonable measures to follow best practices, which most industries have rolled out, and keep their customers and employees safe, they will be protected from liability. We are hopeful that that bill might be on Governor Gianforte's desk to sign sometime next week or at the very beginning of the following week.
And one of the exciting parts of that, in just the hearing today, Senator Fitzpatrick mentioned that when he was looking at trying to pattern that bill, he did look at the open range law and patterned some of the gross negligence. So that makes it even better.
Yep. There's a cowboy in every corner, isn't there?
Yes.
Great. Well, kind of moving on, in addition to like the COVID rollout that Governor Gianforte has rolled out, his first executive order also was the creation of the Red Tape Task Force, and you have been charged to lead that task force. So we just want to talk to you and get a little bit more information from you on what that task force might look like and what you'll be doing in the coming months as it relates to cutting the red tape for business owners in our state.
I am excited about this, and so is Governor Gianforte, that we deliberately want to be that our first message coming out is we are serious about regulatory reform. And it's a marathon. It's not something that's going to happen in 2 weeks. My legal background, I think, is going to be helpful because I have represented many clients, farmers, ranchers, small business owners, the burden of complying with our regulations. Do you know that it would take you 7 weeks, 40 hours a week, to read through Montana's regulations? And we're expecting our small businesses, farmers, ranchers to understand these. Often they have to turn to lawyers to navigate it. And even when they do, the delays that many of them experience working with the various agencies is just not acceptable. And I'll give you an example. I was speaking with a farmer this summer. He had applied to move his point of diversion because the stream had meandered. So he had to put his pump just a few hundred yards downstream. 2 years later, he does not have his change of use, change his point of diversion in place, even though the stream has long since moved on. And that is absolutely unacceptable. When you can't irrigate your fields, we're causing loss and burdens that just aren't necessary. So I'm going to be working with all of the different agencies, asking each of them to identify kind of a rules review officer, going through identifying outdated, unnecessary regulations. Where can we streamline the permit process and bring customer service and prompt answers back into the process? And we're also going to be asking stakeholders to get involved. I want the stock growers. We've gotten lots of comments. Send your comments to me, kristen.juras@mt.gov. I'm building folders. Anything you're experiencing in the permitting process for water rights and gravel permits, whatever it might be, let me know to help us identify where we really need to focus first and to work. And we will, agency by agency, begin starting to make changes to these rules, reducing the number of rules, but more importantly, just streamlining processes and making government more efficient and more customer friendly.
Love to hear that. And the Lieutenant Governor just gave her email out, so no one has an excuse now not to communicate those concerns to her. Take advantage.
And we had the opportunity to visit a little with the governor and our organization, talking just a little bit about what this pandemic has really, what we've incurred really from our business, and what it really has shown is that there is a lot of interest in sourcing local meat and really some of the challenges that we face in Montana with meat processing and potentially even just shipping that interstate meat. And I know that there's been, the governor has some interest in this, and just wondering if you may be able to share kind of your thoughts on where we might be able to work in this area to potentially make some more opportunity for Montana producers.
Yes, this is another area both Governor Gianforte and I are very interested in. We have a great Montana brand, both our livestock producers as well as our agricultural grain producers. And we're just not, number one, doing enough to keep that Montana brand through the supply chain. And of course, we have some federal limitations that we have to work with as well. So let me tell a few things that are already on. So for example, the butcher program at Miles City, we can't have local processing if we don't have local butchers. And we fully support that and expansion of that. And that's part of the trades tax credit incentive to get meat processors an incentive to send apprentices to these sorts of schools. We also, Senator Bogner is carrying a bill, and I'll be talking to him, working with him to provide exemptions from inspection processes, federal processes for the local sale of Montana raised, produced, processed meats. And we do need to provide incentives for more processing facilities in Montana, everything from a friendlier permitting process while keeping the environment safe. We can do that. They're not mutually exclusive. So we'll be looking at a variety of ways to improve the distribution of Montana beef, preserving that line, and just value added agriculture. In fact, this is part of my lunch today, this crackling kamut out of Big Sandy. Hoffman has done a good job of, taking wheat and selling it by the ounce. And we need to work together with farmers, ranchers, private. Government does not create jobs. It's you all that create the jobs, create the products, and we need to get out of your way and find out how to help you do this successfully. And we're excited about that.
Yeah, and we do just pride ourselves in raising some of the best beef in the world, and it'd be nice to keep that Montana brand all the way through to the consumer so they can just enjoy that and know where it comes from.
Yep.
Well, Lieutenant Governor, you've covered quite a bit with us. Your plate is very full, but in addition to everything we've already covered, board appointments have been an area that you have been tasked with as well. And so we've seen some board appointments roll out over the last week or so, and just wanted to kind of get an update from you on where those are at and some of the appointments that have been made.
Okay, and I'm actually going to start with directors of agencies. Okay. Governor Gianforte had the ability to appoint heads of 12 different agencies, including the Department of Agriculture, Mike Foster, and we forwarded his name to the Senate for confirmation. The Senate does have the ability to confirm each of these appointments. Of course, for the Board of Livestock, there's the executive director of the Livestock Department, which is hired and supervised by the Board of Livestock. And we did announce for the Board of Livestock, Gene Curry, former stock grower president, as a new board member. His term will start March 1st, as well as Alan Redfield out of Livingston. So we're excited about the work that they'll be doing and working closely with them. We also, on the Livestock Loss Board, Doreen Gillespie has been reappointed. Elaine Alstead out of Big Timber will be coming on the board, and Joseph Kipp from Browning, Montana. So and there's also some legislation going through, you're probably aware of, for some better tools for the Livestock Board to use in making sure that ranchers are compensated for livestock loss from predators. On the Board of Hail Insurance, we've appointed Bing Van Bergen, who's from Moccasin, Montana. So, we're trying to, this was a really intensive process. We reached out to stakeholders, put together advisory teams for each of the agencies and related boards, and asked for their help in reviewing and selecting exceptional candidates. We were overwhelmed with the number of quality applications we received. I wish we could have appointed more than the slots we had, because we just couldn't say yes to every qualified person, but we kept their names. These appointments, do you know that there's 160 boards in Montana government and about over 1,000, almost 2,000 appointees? So we'll be continuing this process through Governor Gianforte's term, selecting people. There's several other agricultural boards that don't need Senate confirmation, and we'll be turning to those next.
Yeah, Lieutenant Governor, I would just congratulate you and the governor, the work that you've done, and just including that broad. And from our perspective, certainly you put together just a great team. From the Department of Ag, Mike Foster, we've had a lot of familiarity working with Mr. Foster, and we've also had the opportunity to sit down with Ms. Castor with the DNRC, and so certainly, from our perspective, those are going to be some great qualified applicants, and we really do look forward to working with them in the future.
Yeah, and Mike Honeycutt's doing a great job over at Livestock, and we look forward to working with him too.
Yeah, we certainly do too. Well, I think we've covered everything today. I just once again would like to thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know your plate's very full with all the work that you're doing, and then we put the legislature on top of that. So we just once again like to tell you thank you for spending some time with us, and we appreciate the work that you and the governor are doing for the agriculture and the livestock industry in Montana.
Thanks. It's a pleasure talking to you. I hope we can make this a regular event, and I'm almost putting in as long hours as during calving season.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today.
And we again just want to thank Lieutenant Governor Juris for joining us for an interview. Their team up at the Capitol has been working rapidly as they start their new administration. So we just wanted to thank her for setting some time aside to interview with us. We also wanted to thank you for joining us and listening. So make sure to subscribe to the Rancher's Voice. Always follow us on social media, and make sure to like, comment, and share this episode. If you have questions, feel free to submit those to us at Kenny, KENI, @mtbeef.org. And also listen to us next week as we bring more to you from Helena.
Thanks, everyone.